Sorry, thank you, Zach. Good morning. I'll start over. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a good start to your week. Yeah, I was muted. Okay, so hadn't really said anything important, but what I started to say was I'm going to do the lecture today in two parts. So part one is associated with the lab this week, and then part two is bonus content, which is associated with the window managers. So there's some software updating and installing that has to be done for part two. So I hope that you're able to stick around, but we'll have to be patient during that part because we'll have to wait for our virtual machines to download and install stuff. But anyway, we'll do that part second, I think. And in fact, I'm going to take off this first note to myself and not worry about that and just go straight into content. Okay, so good morning, Justin. Good morning, Zach. Good morning to everybody else, or good day to you if you're watching the video later. We are in week 11, so we're motoring right along. I will point out to you, you can see it on my announcements, but you should see an announcement in Canvas for this class, and that's not from me, that's from the college. So this is a student evaluation survey. And I would appreciate it, and my supervisor would appreciate it if you had the time to fill out that survey. I only see summary data, so I don't see anything that would identify it. It's totally anonymized, and I don't see it for a few weeks after it's completed. So anyway, that's what that student feedback form announcement is about. So if you have the time, it's available for this week. We'd appreciate hearing your feedback. But it's not a requirement, it's not a part of the class, it's from the college, and I don't see any information about who provided what kinds of feedback. Okay, so week 11. The big thing is that the first team project is coming up. So on the home page, if you scroll down, as always, there's a link to the team project. The reminders for the module this week, as it has been for a few weeks now, we'll have that link. And the point is just to give you, create an opportunity for you to both explore a different Linux distribution with the help of your classmates, and then collaborate with your classmates in drawing up a sort of a summary reflection upon that distribution. So what did it feel like to run it? Did it have anything interesting or unusual about it? How do people use it in the real world? So you'll do a little bit of research. But anyway, that's due on Sunday, so that's extra on top of the normal work this week. So please make use of Canvas Inbox, make use of Piazza if you have questions about that. Okay, so Tim says, wait to hear back from teammates. So if you haven't, on your Canvas on the left, if you're in a web browser, you will have an additional link here that says groups, and that's how you link to your group. You'll see a group for Team Project 1 in this class, and you will see the members and you can communicate with them. So hopefully you're all participating. Now if you do have someone in your group who just never shows up and never does anything, I will make note of that, and I will not give them credit for not having contributed. So if no one's helping you out, they're not going to walk away with points that you earned by yourself. But if you find yourself alone in your group and you need a little bit of help, let me know, and I can step in to do some gap filling. So that's a bummer, Tim. I hope that you get somebody show up and actually contribute to your team project. They're not too terrible, but it would be nice to not have to do it by yourself. So if you're stuck by yourself, let me know sooner than later if you want or need a little bit of help. And anybody else, if you're completely alone, let me know, and I'll try to step in to help. But for everybody, if you haven't communicated with your team, check to see if they've been trying to send you messages. If no one sent any messages, then be the person to do that. Get your team going. It's not hard, but my guess would be that it would take an afternoon to do. You have to select a distribution, download a distribution, install a distribution, set up an account on it, explore it a little bit, and then do some internet research about it. So everybody, please, we've been talking about it for several weeks now, and this is the last week before it's due. Okay, so week 11. So at this point in the semester, what we're starting to focus on is the bash shell specifically, and trying to wring out as much of the bash shell's features as possible in the remaining weeks of the class. So we'll talk about the basics, we'll talk about configuration, we will get into several weeks of scripting for the bash shell, which is particularly useful for system administrators, but also just regular users on Linux. It's a highly useful thing to know how to do. So this is week 1 of kind of digging deeper into bash, the born again shell. So we sort of have 3 groupings of content this week. The first one is the configuration files, the dot or hidden files associated with bash. The second one is shell variables and aliases. We've done aliases before, and we're just repeating on that a little bit. And then the last is bash's command line history. So I'm going to be as efficient as I can going through that material so that we can sort of switch into a part 2 and install a couple of window managers and play with them. And that part is going to require some patience because we're all going to have to wait for our systems to update and install some software. Okay. So we'll put the lecture up, of course, as always, and then there's sort of 3 readings attached to the questions that I wrote from them this week, dealing with the 3 areas of content. The lab, as always. So the Piazza discussion is, now that this week we'll be learning about how do you do customizations. This is to actually go do a little bit of research and try out a bash shell customization, see what it feels like. And then the last is the reminders. That should not say Team Project 2, by the way. That should say Team Project 1. Let me see where it goes. That should still be Team Project 1. Let me fix that real quick. Okay, and then Team Project 2 comes after that, of course. Okay, so that's just a reminder. Lab as always, the discussion as always. The team project is due this week. And again, if you find yourself left completely alone and you need some help filling in a few of your gaps, let me know and I'll be your spare team member. Okay, so I'm going to switch my view over to my machine. Be nice probably for you if you could see that. Okay, so this week the first issue we're going to talk about is the bash files, the files that bash is designed automatically to read, to look for either customizations to perform or operations to perform. And if you look over in my notes on the side, there are technically 4 of them, although .bash login, it's rare that I suspect anyone uses that because the way bash works, if it finds a .bash profile, then it doesn't do the .bash login. But we're going to go ahead and explore it just to see how they work. So the thing to be careful of when you're doing your bash configuration files is that they have to be spelled exactly right. So .bash profile is .bash underscore profile, exactly like that. If you name it something different, bash doesn't know to look for something different and it won't find it. All of these files belong in your home directory, and hopefully you're used to by now, if just like the shell, if we put a tilde in a slash, we mean our home directory. So all of these files belong in your user's home directory. You don't have to have them, by the way. If they're not there, then bash just keeps going. But if you have them, then bash will read them and process them. So I'm afraid I may have some in here, and I am going to get rid of them. So, okay, let's just start with a review of the basics real quick. So the fact that the names are preceded by a dot means that a regular listing of a directory's contents won't show them. So in other words, dot files are hidden files. And remember, that doesn't mean that they're actually hidden. It just means that they're not displayed on a regular file listing. So if I do ls, no hidden files. If I do a ls-a, then all the hidden files show. Now I already have bash history, bash login, bash logout, bash profile, bash rc. I'm actually going to get rid of all those and rebuild them. I'm going to leave bash history, but I'm going to get rid of the others. So I'm going to remove .bash login, .bash logout, .bash profile, and .bash rc. So I'm going to remove all of those from my account, and I'm going to start from scratch. So now if I do a long listing, you'll see I left .bash history alone. That's a separate issue, but I just wanted to point out to you that they're all gone. All of my .bash files are gone. Now I do have some other dot files, and these dot files, they're typically used for configuration for programs like vimrc, that's to configure your VI editor settings. Some programs in Linux also use hidden files to store state. Like, where am I at right now? What was my last setting when they ran the program and exited it the last time? So these dot files are not just you creating them. Sometimes the applications themselves create them. Like I didn't make .vim info, and I didn't make .bash history, and I didn't make .config. Those are just there. Some application out there created them. But I am going to now create a .bash login first. So it's .bash. Make sure you're in your home directory, by the way. If you don't put these files in your home directory, then they are not going to work. So I'm in my home. I'm going to use vim to edit .bash underscore login. It has to be spelled exactly like that, because that's precisely what bash looks for. If you name it something different, bash won't find it. So .bash login. I'm just going to put a little statement in here. So I'm going to go into insert mode and say echo bash login running. All I want to do is I want to know, like, when does this happen? Can I see when this happens? So I'll just use an echo statement in here, and if this file should be processed, then I should see an output statement saying that this happened. Something caused this to open. So I escaped to get out of edit or insert mode, and now I'm going to :WQ to write and quit. I will show you that my .bash login file is here. I will show you what's in it. Is that echo statement, and I'll remind you that I'm in my home folder. So that file has to be spelled exactly that way. It has to be in your home folder, or it won't do what it does. So now I'm going to log out. So you're going to exit to log out. So what I'm expecting to have happen, what should happen, is that .bash underscore login file should be processed when I log in. So I'm going to log in, and there it was being processed. So I know that at the moment that I log in, whatever are the contents of that file, they're actually processed by the bash shell. So in a Linux system, you won't use bash login very often. You'll use bash profile instead, but I wanted to point out to you that you typically just do configuration type of things. You might create aliases in your .bash files so that they're automatically loaded up for you, and create sort of other conveniences for yourself so that your life inside of the bash shell is easier. So the way you would use these files is typically to automate the creation of shortcuts or aliases and other conveniences for yourself. You might even keep a little personal log file to remind yourself sort of quickly whenever it is that you log in and log out, that kind of thing. Okay, so there's .bash login. So now you'll notice in my notes that I say it's not needed. And what I really should say is it's ignored if .bash profile, and we're about to prove that. So .bash login is not very often used anymore because if you have a .bash profile file, then that one's going to be read and the .bash login should be ignored. So we're going to try to prove that right now in my home directory. So I'm going to open up .bash profile, has to be spelled exactly like that, .bash _ profile. And in here, I'm going to put an echo statement, so I will say bash profile running, because I want to know when the shell actually processes this file. And I'm just pausing a little bit to give people the time to transcribe it if needed. Okay, then I escape to get out of insert mode, and then :WQ to write and quit. Let me clear and just show you where I'm at. So now I have .bash profile. The contents of .bash profile are that echo statement, and I am in my home directory because that's where the .bash files go. So I'm going to log out again, log back in. So I want you to notice that the bash login is no longer running. So what bash does is it looks for a .bash profile. If it finds it, it runs that, and then it's done. If it's not there, then it looks for .bash login, and if it finds that, it runs it and done. So I believe that the reason why that .bash login is there is for historic compatibility purposes. So I've never used a .bash login file. I always use .bash profile. So note that .bash profile is executed when I log in. So I'm going to remove the .bash login, because if there's a .bash profile, then the .bash login doesn't do anything anyway. So still in my home directory, of course, and then I'll do an all listing just to show you that the login file is gone, and I have a .bash history and a .bash profile. So the profile, what we're going to use it for today is we're going to put some aliases in there. So that's kind of how you would use the .bash profile, is if you want some things loaded up for you when you first logged into the system. Maybe your aliases, which are shortcuts. Maybe you've written a script that you like to execute when you log in. Maybe you have some shell functions you've written. We'll see examples of those later in the semester. So this is a good place to do your customizations that happen every time you log into the system. Okay, you can imagine what .bash logout does. So let's do .bash logout. So .bash profile happens when you log in. .bash login happens when you log in, but if it finds .bash profile first, then it ignores login. So we don't even use the login file. But you will see references to it occasionally because it's there for sort of historical backwards compatibility reasons. So .bash profile is read or processed when I first log in to the system. You might imagine that logout, .bash underscore logout, is processed when you log out from the system. And I'll just do sort of a crude example here in a second of how we might use that. So let's open that up. Now this time, get an insert mode. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to execute the date command, and then we're going to append its output to, I'm just going to call it, make sure it goes in my home directory, logouts.txt. So what I want to do is every time I log out, the date command is going to run, and it's going to append the timestamp of that logout event to the bottom of logouts.txt. And then I'm going to go log in and log out a few times here just to show how that works. Escape to get out of insert mode. Hopefully that's visible to you guys. So date, and then I use the append the date output to, in my home directory, the tilde slash, in my home directory, a file called logouts.txt. And then :WQ to write and quit. So I'm in my home directory. I just created .bash logout, and the contents of .bash logout are the date command appended to a file called logouts.txt. So now I'm going to exit. So what should have happened when I logged out is that that bash logout script should have run. So I'm going to go back in. And let's see if it's there. So there's logouts.txt. If I cat out the contents, so there's the timestamp of that last logout. I'm going to log out one more time. And then if I cat out that logouts file, there's the two logout events 30 seconds apart roughly. And I'll try to show you a sort of a simple use of this. But anyway, so the .bash logout is executed by the shell. It's processed by the shell when you log out of the system. I personally don't use that particular feature myself very often, but you have it available to you if you have some operations that you want to perform when you log out. I'll show you one crude example here in a bit. Okay, so that's the .bash profile, which if you have .bash profile, then you don't need .bash login, so you'll notice that I only have .bash profile because that supersedes .bash login, so I don't even have it because I don't need it because profile does that job. I have a .bash logout. And then the last one is .bash RC. So that one's harder to understand until we get a window manager installed, but I will show you an example. So .bash RC is executed for what are called interactive shells. So I'm going to make one, the .bash RC file. I'm in my home directory. And same as I've been doing, I'm going to insert mode and I'll say bash RC running. So I can see when this bash RC file is actually processed by the shell. And then if you stick around for part 2 in the window manager part, you'll kind of see it in all of its glory. Okay. So that's my .bash rc file. So I'll clear. I will remind you that I'm in my home folder, which is where all these files go. So now I have created myself a .bash logout, a .bash profile, and a .bash rc. The contents of .bash rc are simply an echo statement that prints out something when it is running. So let me show you an example of when this can happen. It turns out that you can run bash, sort of layer an instance of bash on top of itself, and watch what happens. So notice that .bash rc actually ran when I launched a shell interactively. So this is called an interactive shell, and what we mean by that is that I didn't log in to this version of bash. I actually purposely executed it manually. So because I purposely ran a shell after I was already logged in, that's what we call an interactive shell, the bash rc file processed. And I'll show you that when we get some graphical user interfaces up, that bash rc actually becomes very, very important. But for now, just note that bash rc file is processed by the shell when you launch one, not as an act of logging in, but as an act of manually launching one once you're already logged in. And this happens a lot when you are working in a graphical environment. You log into the graphical environment, and then every time you launch a terminal, you're actually launching an interactive shell. You're not re-logging in. So hopefully that'll make more sense when we do the window manager stuff, which makes that kind of fun. Okay, so right now they're all very irritating because they're just doing echoey stuff. But we'll explore aliases real quick, and then I'll show you an example of how we might use that. Okay, so that's the dot files. The .bash profile, .bash login, which is superseded by .bash profile and ignored if you had .bash profile. But those two files would be read in at when you log in to a shell, when you literally log into the system. The .bash rc file is executed whenever you run in what's called an interactive shell. It's not as part of the act of logging in, but you manually execute a shell. And then finally .bash logout is processed or executed when you log off of the system. But the whole point of these things is to kind of have the shell do work behind the scenes for you when you're logging in or logging out. It'll set up your customizations. We're going to do one here in a second. So you can kind of see an example of that. Okay, so I should have put aliases first because I want to use that. Before we do the bash history and the bash variable stuff. So, and I want to do aliases now because I can show you an example of setting up aliases and then actually using their products with our dot files. Okay, so we've done aliases before, kind of a small shift, but aliases is a feature of the bash shell, so it's a way to create shortcuts. You probably already have some. If you type alias, I think. No, it's aliases, isn't it? If you were running, by the way, so get out of the interactive shell. I'm just going to exit and log back in just to have you all do that. So make sure you can exit all the way out and just log in. So there's my .bash profile running, even though it's not technically doing anything. All right, now we're going to look at alias, not aliases. So if you type the word alias, you will see what are your present aliases. And it turns out that a whole lot of these are automatically loaded for you. These are just presets in the CentOS system. So what these all mean is they are all shortcuts. So notice the alias LL here on this line means ls-l-color equals auto. So I'm going to try ls-l-color equals auto and see what happens. So there's the result of running that full command. Now I'm going to try the alias to it, which is supposed to be LL. Same output. So aliases are just shortcuts for longer commands. You already knew this, but so this is kind of a review. I also have one that's called L dot. So that's what L dot does. I'm looking at my alias list here. Notice that LS itself is actually aliased to show color. Notice, by the way, that VI is aliased to automatically want to launch VI improved. Which is an alias, and then there's a whole bunch of other aliases. So we're going to make one. We'll start just with the simple one. So you know that RM is a very dangerous command because it just deletes the thing, right? So I'm going to touch a don't delete me and just point out to you that if I do RM don't delete me, it allows me to delete it. So let me get that. I use the arrows to get back to the earlier command. So if I put that file back, if I do rm-I, don't delete me. If you use the -I option on RM, you get a confirmation dialog. So are you sure you want to delete that file? And you can say yes or no to it. So if you say no, then it's still there. So if you're super paranoid, or if you're setting up a system for a newbie type, you might protect them by doing an alias where you say RM, let's actually have RM be rm-I. So that any regular or effort to use RM by itself actually causes the dialog to happen. So in theory now, I can RM something like my logouts file, and the alias causes the interactive prompt to appear. So that's sort of a simple alias that you could create, but it might be a nice one to embed for a new user. And then I'm going to say, no, I want to keep that file. If I type alias now, I will see that somewhere in here, there it is. So they're alphabetized. So notice in the middle, there's my alias been added to the list. Okay, so I'm going to log out. Log back in. And I'm going to show you that my RM, egrep fcode, is gone. So a customization like an alias won't stick unless you put it somewhere where the shell knows to create that alias and process it into your environment. So this is where the dot files come in handy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my .bash profile, my processed on login file, and I'm going to type an O to open the line below for editing. So notice I'm in insert mode. So I typed O here, which put me into insert mode on the next line down. O means open a line. And I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to make an alias in here. So the same alias that I created before, but now I am putting it, and I'll write it so you can see, I put it in my .bash profile so that every time I log in, this alias should be available to me. So I'm going to colon WQ, still in my home. The file I just edited was .bash profile, so just showing you that's the contents of it. But I want to show you that if I type alias, it's not there yet. So because .bash profile is executed on login, now there is another way to do this. We're going to do it in just a second, but technically right now since the .bash profile is only executed on login, we need to log out and then log back in to have that processed in. And notice there's my alias. Okay, so now that it's in .bash profile, it is created as a part of my login environment when I log into the system. Okay, so let's add another one and look at the other way to do this. So I think I referenced one. We're going to go back into profile. Cal date. Why do I have cal date? I just had to make one up here. But we'll just do that. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to make another alias for myself. I'll say PR. I want to be careful about that. I'll just make a little crude one. So what I want to do is where I would do an echo, I can now optionally do say. It's just kind of a junk one, but I want to use it as an example to show you how to get these aliases processed in. Okay, so alias say is echo. Get out of insert mode, :WQ to save. Still in my home. I was just editing .bash profile, so there's the 3 lines that I've typed in there so far. And again, because I haven't logged out and re-logged back in, my new say alias is not available yet. But this time I'm not going to log back out. This time I'm going to show you, like, what if I make a change to my .bash profile but I don't want to log out right now? Then you can do what's called sourcing it. So you can use the command source. You don't technically need the / here because you're already in your home directory, but it's safe to do that sometimes. So what sourcing does is it reloads all the definitions inside of that file without you having to log out. So there's the echo statement because it had to go in there and reread what's going on inside of it. Now if I look at my aliases, now I had the say alias, and I can say hello, and it's the same thing as an echo hello. So the source command allows you to reload a set of .bash file definitions without having to log out to get them. Another way you can do that so we did source. The shortcut to that is to use a dot space, which is just the dot is an alias for source. So same thing. So you can reload through .bash file definitions without having to log out and log back in. But aliases is a good example of a thing that I use a lot of in my .bash profiles. I have a series of aliases that just sort of shorten up, create shortcuts for frequently used commands. And you notice there's all my aliases. Okay, so there's the aliases part. How are we doing on time? Because I want to leave time for window managers if possible. I think we're going to be okay. Okay, so let's talk quickly about the history command. So what we've covered is the configuration files, the dot files for bash. We've looked at aliases, which is, for me, one of the ways that I use my dot files is I use them to create aliases that are always present for me whenever I log into the system. I use the history a lot as well. So this is another feature of the bash shell. It keeps a history of your commands, And the easy way to access your history is by using the up and down arrow keys. So if you start arrowing up, you'll see, going back for a very, very long time, all the commands that you have typed. So I'm up, 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 forever and ever. And once you get up a ways, if you pass by what you wanted, you can come back down with a down arrow. So a quick and easy way to cycle back through your command history is with the up and down arrows. I'm just up arrowing, down arrowing, and then I bottomed out because now I'm at the present time. If you want to see your entire command history, you can use literally the command history. So at the moment, my command history is sitting at 414 entries. You can also say I just want to see like the last 10 commands in my history, which is kind of handy. Or if you need to go all the way back to the beginning, you can grab your history and pipe it through head, which will get the first 10 by default. Or you can pipe it through less, which will let you paginate it. So that's handy. So the command history is very, very powerful thing. Okay, so well, let's start with this. So I'm going to redo something. So notice that the commands in your history all have numbers on them. And if there's a particular command that you want to rerun, let's just say just for garbage's sake, I want to rerun this command number 405 here, this clear command. Then you use an exclamation point, or what I'll call a bang, and the history number of the command you want to re-execute. So bang 405 will re-execute command 405, which is a clear command. Now if I look at my history again, that bang command that I did, that just reran as a clear on number 421 here. So there's that thing. Okay, so that's one way to get at your command history, is with bang and the number of the item that you want to re-execute. If you do, so I'm going to do echo hello. Let me clear first. So my very last command that I just typed was echo hello there. If you want to repeat exactly the last command, you can use bang bang, 2 exclamation points, and that will re-execute the immediate prior command. So there it is, showing me the command, and there it is executing it. So that's, and then one more thing about command history, and then we can move on to stuff, to variables. Let's look at the history again. Okay, so another thing you can do, so this command that says say hello on it, command 408, not only can you use the number of it, but you can use the letters of it insofar as they're unique. So what I'm telling the shell to do here with bang say is go backwards in the history and re-execute the first command that has the first 3 letters say. So it should be that one. Yeah, so that's okay. I'm trying to look for one that I can take advantage of here. Okay, so I'm going to clear and then do a history. So let me just show you how this works. So notice there's a clear on 427, 423, 419, 415, 413, 409, clear. There's this cat command up here. Now if I just type bang C, the shell is going to start with the last command, and it's going to stop on the first command, and its first letter is a C, which is a clear command. So when you do the bang string style, you have to give it enough to make that it can find the unique one you're looking for. So for example, this cat command way up here, which I could do bang 403 on, if I do bang CA, that's the first command that starts with the letter CA. So the shell will unravel all the way up to this cat command. That's the first command in the history that starts with the letter CA. So there's the cat command and there's the echoes. So there's a couple of different ways that you can re-execute old commands, is with their number or with a string that helps the shell uniquely identify them going backwards in the command history. It's a pretty cool thing. Far and away the thing I use the most of is the arrows, up and down. But for particularly complicated commands, I will use the bang number or the bang string style to get to that command that I know I had spent a lot of time working out how to do it. Okay, so that's the bash history. I should have put here in my notes bang number, because we did that one as well. Why is this? I'm going to stretch this a little bit and hopefully that works for you. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I used up more time than I wanted to, but I'll stick around and do part 2, and then you guys can decide what you want. But for this week's lab, this is the last thing. The other thing that bash has in it, it has the ability to store information as variables. If you're taking a scripting or a programming class, same idea. You can create labels that contain data in them. So I can, for example, say for me equals Boyd. And now I have a variable called me with the data Boyd, and if I want to, I can echo out using the $sign the value of me. So the $sign is how I get the value back of that variable me, and there's Boyd. So the shell allows you to create variables, but I think the big question in the lab is what are the variables that it already has sort of as built-in variables. So the way you can see what all the variables in bash are is with the env command. Now there's a lot of them, and we may have to use less to slow this down, but the bottom ones are instructive enough. So these are all the pieces of information that the shell is constantly storing. So it has a language setting, has a host name setting, it has a PWD, it knows who the user is that's using this shell, it knows which shell to use for this user, the login name, it knows your path that we've talked about. The size of my history file is limited to be 1,000. So it's got these built-in variables in it. And you can access those for viewing by end, and probably want to pipe those through less so you can paginate them. Although for me it turns out that was all the ones that showed up. It's got a whole bunch of color settings here. Yeah, so that was all that there was. Alternately, you can type print env, I think, and see the same thing. So these are all the pieces of data, the variables that my shell is presently managing. So PWD is an example. I can echo out the value of, say, PWD. Now the command PWD does exactly the same thing. I can also echo out the value of my shell. So those are shell variables, and the $sign is letting me see what the current value is of that variable. I can echo out who I am, which is the same thing as the who am I command. So that's mostly just introducing you to the concept of the shell variable. So I'm going to review, and then I'm going to switch gears over to the window manager part. So we talked about the dot files. When the shell processes them, either at login or at logout, or for bash RC, what we call interactive shells. We talked about aliases. The reason why we did that mostly is because that's a way that I commonly use my .bash profile, is to set up my aliases so that they're always there when I log in. We talked about bash history, which is a convenience. It makes it a lot easier, saves you typing time because you can just cycle back through or target specific commands in your command history and re-execute them. And we talked about bash variables, and mostly that's just to let you know that bash is actually managing a whole bunch of information. A lot of different kinds of information this shell is actually tracking. What your path is, what your present working directory is, who your user account name is, and a whole bunch of other things. So those are all kind of core bash shell features as we sort of go into the deeper dive into bash this part of the semester. Okay, that's part one. Part two is bonus. It's going to be a little time consuming, so I will understand if anyone bows out on this part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a be right back screen. And I'm going to go get some water, and if you're going to stick around with me, this would be a good time to stretch your legs. I don't think that this is going to take super long, but it is going to require some patience. So if you don't want to do the window manager thing, you don't need to for the lab. This is just here for those of you who are interested in learning, getting the extra out of it. And it's going to be a little time consuming because we have to install software, but it's fun. And it's super cool, and it will give you graphics if you're interested in that. So I'm going to put a be right back screen. So for those of you watching later or watching at home, this be right back screen, when I return, we enter into part two, and we're going to do bonus material, which is totally optional. So if you don't care to stick around, that's perfectly fine. I understand. This will be up there as a video if you'd like to watch it later. If you are sticking around, then this is a good time to get yourself a glass of water or stretch your legs. I'm just going to take like a 2-minute break to go get myself some water, and then I'm going to come back and we'll do part two. Okay, so thanks for sticking around if you're still sticking around. We're just going to do this. And again, you'll see that I've created a detailed, I hope, detailed enough set of instructions for you to do this on your own if you want to, but it'll at least get us started. So what we're doing here in part 2 is completely bonus material. It's completely optional. The labs don't reference it. But if you want to see, sort of build up a picture of the various options you have for customizing a Linux installation, then I think this can be helpful because we're going to add graphical user interface today. So this was the poll that you guys did. You voted for i3, which was kind of unfortunate because it was the most difficult one to work out how to install on CentOS 8, which is what we're running. But I did work it out, so we're gonna have at it. Okay, so it's gonna take a little bit of patience, but what's a good idea, you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna log out of my running system and I'm gonna shut it down. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I'm going to make a clone of my system as it is in its current state. So that if something terrible goes wrong, then I can just delete the messed up one and start back to where I left off with the clone. So I am powering off my virtual machine. And I'm going to create a clone. And I'm going to see, hopefully you can see this. So you might be able to do this while it's running, but I have a feeling that you can't. Anyway, if you, inside the VirtualBox Manager, if you right click the CentOS one, there's a clone option. That's the one I'm going to choose. Now you're not seeing this part, so let me get this part up here. Okay, so this little dialogue here. If I can now find it, there you are. Okay, so I'm going to leave all this stuff alone. It's going to call it clone, that's fine. And then the thing you want to be careful of is you want to do a full clone. So hopefully you have the hard disk space for this. I'm going to make a full clone, and this is just because on the off chance that I make a terrible, terrible mistake, I don't want to lose all of my prior work. So this is one of the beauties of a virtual machine, is that you can just create a clone and the last sort of good known state of your virtual machine is preserved. So make sure you do full clone and then clone, and this is going to take a little bit. I will show you my progress. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. I'll make it big. So this is the part where I'm talking about we have to do some things that require some patience. Okay, so now, I don't know what this thing is for, but let's get rid of those. Okay, so I'm going to dawdle a little bit. Just wait for a minute or so, and hopefully that's enough for many of you to get your clone done. If it works out better for you, you might just come back when I've posted the finished video, and then you can sort of stop and pause and replay as you go if you're interested in this stuff. So I don't want to wait too long if you're doing it live with me. I don't want to leave anybody behind. So if I start to get ahead of you and you're working alongside me in chat, just please let me know and I'll hit the pause button. The important thing we want to step away from this stage is that we have a clone, so that we can use it to get back to the last known good state of our virtual machine if needed. So now that I have a clone created, I'm going to restart my original CentOS and the clone is there as a backup. If I decide I don't need it, I can always remove it. But I'm going to go ahead and boot back in. And I'll restore the window when it gets to the stage when I can show it to you again. Because while it's going through the boot process, it's kind of funky. Okay, so let me get it to where you can see that again. Okay, so clone created. And now I've relaunched the original with the clone set aside just in case something goes wrong. I haven't had a problem with this in my experiments, but I thought just to save you the heartache potentially, let's make a clone. Okay, so we are on part 2. Lost my place for a second. Let me move this over so I can see this better. Okay, so I'm going to log in. Now this does assume that you did the sudoer step last week, so if you didn't do the sudoer step, then these things won't work the same. You'll probably have to log in as root to do a lot of this. So if you never did the sudoers thing that we did last week, then highly recommend that you go back and you pan through the video until we get to the sudoers discussion. So this does assume that sudoers is active. Okay, so there's my bash profile running. So there's a lot of steps here, and some of them require a lot of patience. But what I'm going to be referring to is my part 2 notes down here. So I have created a file and put it on my own web server that contains the instructions for all of this stuff. Now I may need help from chat, so I'm going to use the which command to see if I have a wget. So wget is a kind of like a file downloader on the command line, but you can use it to download files from web servers. So if you're not getting a wget, I think that you will, because I don't remember having installed this, but I could be wrong. So you can let me know if you don't have a wget, and we will fix that. But assuming you have wget, then we're going to use it to go fetch a file. So I'm in my home directory, and I'm going to go use it, and you have to type this carefully. I tried to make it relatively short, but we're going to go download this file onto our Linux system. The .sh part is because I intend for it ultimately to be a crude shell script. It's really just there for a convenience. So if you get errors, it's either because you don't have wget, and we'll fix that, or it's because you mistyped that URL, which is also over here in the notes. So I'm going to hit enter, and if everything works okay, I will get that file. So wm.sh saved. That worked for me. I'm going to use, okay, so no wget. Okay, so let's go back a step. So if you don't have wget, then do a, okay, so there's no wget. So let's do the updates. So do sudo yum updates. This could take a step, a sec. Or do we just go straight to, let's just install it. So do a sudo yum install wget so that you have that utility. At some point, I guess I put it in there for myself and then forgot. Now mine's going to say you already have it, but if you don't have it, then it's going to probably ask you. So I'll wait. Maybe if someone in chat, when you get it installed, it's probably fairly small and quick. You can let me know, and I'll wait until we're ready to move on. And you're going to see different output for me because I had at some point installed it for myself, I guess. Okay, so War Dog's got it. Hopefully that's going relatively quick for everybody. It's a small utility. Great. Okay, Justin's got it too. So now we'll go back to, I'm going to use arrows, by the way. So this is on my own web server, and I did this because there's a lot of steps, and I thought if someone just kind of got sick of doing this, they could make their lives easier by allowing them to come back to it later. But I also am going to open it up on my screen and sort of go through it manually. So if you do wget, hopefully it just fetches it for you and everything's okay. Hey, that was pretty wise of it. I don't need that extra one. And then I'm gonna cat it out. It's a long file, but in fact, let's not do that. Let's use less on it. So it's got a whole bunch of commands in it, and the reason why there's the pound sign at the front of so many of the lines is because we're actually gonna execute it as a shell script at a point to make it so you don't have to type as much. So this one line up here that says Raven on it, that was such a pain in the rear to type that I thought I would try to save you the typing and put it into a shell variable. So we're going to get to use a shell variable. So there's a lot of steps here, but it shouldn't be too bad, I hope. So I'm going to open those same notes, and then you'll be able to see on the side of my Twitch screen. But anyway, you have those notes there later if you need to refer back to them. And you can do things like this, by the way. You could use head on it and then kind of just figure out how deep you need to go. Right, so, or you can use less. But anyway, you can use head, less, more to kind of get at the section that you want to work on. This would be a lot easier inside of a graphical user interface, but I'm going to open it over here so that we have it to refer to. Okay, so hopefully everyone has that file, and that's mostly just so you have notes for later, but it will also make a little bit of the typing less painful. Okay, so we're going to go down to let's go ahead and make it executable. So permissions. So we're going to add the executable bit to it. I wonder if I should have put export. So I'm going to make it executable, and then I'm going to run it. And uh-oh, the line endings are messed up. That is a bummer. That's fine. We can't do that conveniently. I may have to upload a new version of that for later. How do we want to do that? It's using Windows line endings. So it's not going to run as a shell script. That's all right. We'll do it something different. So don't worry about the chmod stuff. We're not going to do it that way, but we can still use it. Okay, so we did the clone step. So that's the first thing we did, is make a clone. So now we're going to go down into, so it turns out to get graphics running on a system like CentOS requires a fair amount of software And when we did our minimal installs initially, we stripped out all of that extra software. So we have to get a lot of the software back that allows for graphics. So the first step I'm going to do is this sudo yum install epel release. What this step does is it loads in an additional repository of software. So we need this additional repository of software to get the graphics. So it's going to want to do a little bit of install, but this basically gives us access to the extra software that has the graphical stuff in it. So I'm going to answer yes to that. Went fairly quick for me. Hopefully that's true for you guys as well. Now we're going to do something that probably is going to be time consuming. So that's step one. Now I'm going to go to step two, which is a sudo yum update. So now that I've added a new repository of software, I'm going to update my system software, and I'm also going to pull down all of the listings of the new software that I just gained access to. So there's that extra packages for Enterprise Linux. That's what EPL means. Right now it's reading in all the available software from that new repository. And then it's going to want to download 83 megs this time. So I'm going to say yes to that and let the updates happen. So here's another spot where I'll probably wait to see when people are done in chat if you're hanging in there. This isn't even the big one. But it's one of the bigger ones. I'll fix line endings while I'm waiting. Line endings. Yeah, it's the line endings. So yeah, this one's taking a little bit of patience. I couldn't think of a better way to do this, unfortunately, other than just to sit through it and be patient about it. Especially since some of you are sitting there live, but let's just get the thing going. I'm going to go fix that file while this is running, so I'll be back in just a second. It's going to beat me, in fact. Someone got an error. What does the error say? I don't know if I can debug it without seeing it, but we'll try. WordDog, what was your error? It may be too complex to type in chat. Hopefully we can fix it. So if you're getting errors, I don't know what to do. Maybe your system's slightly different from mine, which can easily happen. So we'll do our best to fix it. Okay, so that was the update. So you just kind of multitask a little bit. So the next command is this group install command. So most of us call this xface, but group install means that you're actually referring to something, which this XFCE actually refers to a grouping of software. So it comes with a whole bunch of goodies in it. EPEL modular errors. I would just try to WordDog rerun the update command, and hopefully that works. Double check the EPEL release command. So where is that? So double check that. I have no idea. I see one possible solution to that. So you can try this, WordDog. It may or may not work. Let me look it up again. You might try running that command and see if that helps. I don't know what would cause that, because I've done this a half dozen times over the last 2 days on this CentOS system and haven't seen that before. So I hope it's just a networking issue or something. But try this command, sudo rm-rf/var/cache/dnf, and we'll see. You probably, and then run the update again. If that doesn't work, I don't know what to do. We might just have to go back and re-grab. Oh, actually, no, because I didn't give you a CentOS. Anyway, so try that. I'm not going to execute that on my system, but maybe that will allow I Googled it and someone found that. May have helped. I hope you're not hopelessly stuck. But I don't know what else would cause it. WordDog, are you using is there something different about your CentOS, or is it just the same one that we all use? In which case, I wouldn't know how to explain it. Right. I don't know. I've done it many times over the last couple of days in practicing, and I'm not having this issue. So I wish I could help you, but I can't help you, unfortunately. You might just see if Google has any answers to that question, but obviously I can't do a whole lot about it here, so I'm sorry about that. It stinks. So the video will be there. If we can get past that, then we can go back and redo this stuff. I'll see how far we can get with everybody else. So the next step after the update, which one of us is the update's erroring out for some reason. The next step is to install a whole bunch of graphical stuff. It's a capital X, so be careful there. And this one has a fair amount of stuff in it. And while mine is going, I'm going to go Google that EPAL modular error. So the download's 220 megs, which could take a spell for some people. I said no. Why I said no, I don't know why. I think I will say yes this time. So this one does take a while, and I'm going to go Googling EPEL modular and see if I can find an answer. So if you're still hanging in there and it's still working, then this one is just going to test our patience a little bit. And again, if you got to bow out, it's fine. I'm going to finish, and I'll leave the video there. If you want to sort of fast forward yourself and stop and pause later. EPEL modular error. I wonder, War Dog, if it's if you're behind something weird on the network, if you're behind a proxy or something, that could be an issue. Yeah, other people. So War Dog, other people had luck with that. So I'll make a. Other people have had luck with that, but. It looks like it is likely a network issue. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was waiting for me. There is a way to run Yum non-interactively where you just say yes to everything, which I might start doing so that it keeps running. Okay, so maybe it is a VPN issue, War Dog. Hopefully, from what I can tell, most people who have issues with this, with that EPEL stuff, it's a networking issue. Still got a ways to go. This is the long one. The rest of them are not bad. But this one is the long one. Well, now I got to monitor because I didn't tell it to say yes to stuff. So anyway, all that crud. There's a lot of them that have X in them. GTKs, GUI libraries. There's a lot of anyway. All this stuff is required to get any kind of graphics going. Now we are getting additional things that we don't necessarily need, but this is the easiest way to do it. So if you're watching the video later, this is a section where you can probably fast forward while we're waiting for the install. Still with the error. Yeah, that's a bummer. You tried removing the DNF cache, which is the software manager cache. That's a bummer. I don't know how to get that fixed. I've been Googling it, which is the best thing I know to do, and just try the things they say in Google. So War Dog, if you... The only thing I can think of otherwise is I can upload this, I can upload my CentOS with all the goodies installed in it if you want. So you can kind of just see how we're going about it, and you have that file that reminds you of the commands, and then if you want, I can upload the finished product with all the stuff in it. I think I have space on my web server where I can do that. So just let me know in chat if you want me to put up my completed work with all the goodies in it. Then I'm happy to do that. And at least that should get you over the hump because the software will just already be there. But that's a bummer. I'm sorry that's not cooperating. Because we're about to get to the fun part. So Justin's is done. So now you're just waiting on me. Okay, so there's two of us that are done, so I'm going to go ahead and just, what you can now do is you can actually, so that's start XFCE4, start Xphase 4, which has been working for me anyway, should load you up into a graphical. Now you're going to get lots of weird complaints, but we should get ourselves into, so technically this is not a window manager, this is a full desktop environment, but in CentOS it's a lot easier to run this, to get the graphical software installed this way than other ways. We don't have a whole lot, but it does sort of have the stuff that you're accustomed to. It has multiple desktops on it, or workspaces as they call them. You can right click the desktop and it's got some options in here, like you can open a terminal. There's my bash RC running, by the way, because I just opened an interactive terminal. So now we've got a graphical system, and then if you go up to applications up here, if you log out, you're not actually logging out of the system, you're logging out of this graphical environment. So I'm going to log out. And now I'm back to the command line. So I always enjoy that moment, like, haha, I'm back at the command line, but I've got graphics if I want them. So that's a little test to see that XFace is installed and working. So that on my notes is step 4. We started the graphical environment. Once you have that, by the way, you don't actually need to exit out of it, but it's an interesting test to do, but I'm going to stay logged out of it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install a window manager. So XFace is simple, but it is a fully featured desktop environment, which means that it has all the icons, and it installs with applications, and it allows you to do configuration through it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop back down a step, and we're going to do just a window manager. And a window manager, for the most part, all it actually does is allow you to run things in Windows. It doesn't have any extra features, but we're going to find that out right now by installing OpenBox. Now we're doing OpenBox first, because this one is small and it's easy to use. So I'm going to use sudo yum. I think I did the wrong password just now. Okay, so this one's not too big. So this is an alternate graphical environment, but it's less featured than XFace. So relatively small. Now the trick here is that this one requires a little bit different setup. So to run OpenBox, the way you do this is a little bit different. So you'll see in the notes here, the next step after installing OpenBox is I need to edit a file called xinitrc.xinitrc in my home directory. So now we're getting a little bit more advanced. But to run OpenBox, I'm in my home. I'm going to use VI to create a file called .xinitrc. And then inside of there, I'm going to put exec openbox-session. And this is not unusual, but it requires sort of a, this is because using OpenBox requires a bit of a process for the system to go through. So that's what's happening here. So that's step 6. You can, while you're here, go ahead and leave yourself start XFace 4, but with the hash symbol so that it's not functional. But what you can do then is you can use this same process to get yourself into different environments once you have it set up. Hopefully I'm not going too fast, and I know like some people's machines are just not cooperating. Okay, so that is .xinitrc in my home directory. I added this line, and then the line below it I put with the hash symbol start XFace 4 so that I can sort of switch those out between them later. So I am in the wrong place. Okay, so colon WQ. Now for this step, and we are on step 7, which is launching OpenBox. So when you type start X, what happens is the graphical system actually looks in your .exinit or C file, and if it finds something it can execute in there, it will, like execute OpenBox, which we just did. So if I press enter now, I'm going to be taken into an OpenBox session. Now you'll notice immediately that OpenBox has no bells and whistles. There's a mouse pointer, and it looks like it must be graphics, but you can't really see what in the haze going on until you right click. So if you right click, you'll notice, okay, I get a little bit of things I can work with. If I brush over that arrow, I can look around. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on here because we haven't really installed much utilities. The administration keeps coming, but we do have a terminal. So we can launch a terminal. So, and notice that was an interactive terminal, so bash RC is running. So that's what's called a window manager. It basically gives you barely anything else other than the ability to run windowed applications. Hopefully, again, I'm not going too fast to mess people up. So that's OpenBox running, and I'm going to log out, which will drop me back into my regular command line environment. So now we got OpenBox, which is a window manager, which is a super stripped down. It really only gives you the ability to open things in Windows and move them around. The first thing we tried, which is XFace, is more of what you think of as a desktop with some built-in applications and icons that get you places. And but you notice that the OpenBox was almost nothing. Okay, so now's the hard part, which is the IF3 part, which is something of a pain in the rear to do. So it doesn't take super long, but the second step is hard to type. So we'll just have to be patient. But the first thing is, so now we have XFace, we have OpenBox, and now we're going to do I3. This was difficult to figure out how to do. But I did figure it out, so I'm sharing it with you if you're interested. So we need to tweak our software repository environment a little bit. So we need to gain access to some additional software here. And I've also highlighted it in the notes on the side. What I'm doing is step 1 here. And if nothing happens, then in theory you're doing A-okay. And hopefully I've not just sort of raced away and making everybody miserable. But again, the completed video will be up there, so you can stop, start, rewind, fast forward me as needed. And all of these steps are in that initial file that we downloaded. So, and numbered and hopefully described enough that you can use them. Okay, so we did that part. Okay, now this Raven part is a pain. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grep Raven in that file that I downloaded. And it's this first one that's important to me because I need to type all that stuff. I was going to try to make that easier, but the line endings were fighting me. So anyway, you can still get this stuff. Since we don't have a mouse, we're going to have to type it, although I guess we could have gone in. Now let's just do it. Okay, so sudo yum. Well, we can do this. Let's just type that whole thing. Raven equals pkgs.byn. Check yourself for typos. There, I got an extra A. Release. If you have to pack it to make sure you're getting it right, do so. So, and a quote. That's a lot of stuff. I'll slow down a little bit. I'm going to do a little echo test on it just to see, and then I'm going to go sort of check my typing and see if I have to redo it. All of this is for that i3 thing that got the most votes for a window manager. It's not embedded in the standard CentOS software yet. And it's not CentOS 8, so we have to take this extra step. So I typed it in, and then I did an echo on it just to make sure that it matches the grep one up here, which I'm pretty sure that it does. If it doesn't, I'll get an error and then I'll go fix it. So now we do step 2 in the notes over here, which is sudo yum install Raven, which is why we created that variable. So this is also pretty fast because this is just you can even tell in the notes here. You have installed an unofficial repository. So Raven is a unofficial software repository, but they have i3 in it. That's why we're doing this. It's a crazy lot of stuff, isn't it? So anyway, that Raven thing was actually just like the EPEL release. So this is another software repository. So now I'm going to go on to step 3, which is update my database of available software. So there's Raven's RPM repo. So it's reading that database for yet more software. And it's going to want to download some stuff, so I will let it. Now I like to answer the yeses just because I like to see what's going on a little bit. Okay, so it installed some stuff, but we had to do all that stuff if we want to get i3, which is the window manager that you guys voted for. And if anyone is in chat, I'll wait for a few seconds, but maybe someone can in chat if you're still, I may have lost everybody, but if I didn't and you're still working along, and haven't got stuck on something breaking, if you can let me know you're okay to proceed, then I can use that. Otherwise, I'll just keep going here after a few seconds, and hopefully you can follow along later. Remember that early on in the video, we downloaded a file that has all this is the instructions that we used wget to grab earlier. This is all bonus and optional, and I'm more than happy to try to work through any errors that you have. I'm also more than happy to share my CentOS with all of this stuff installed if you're interested in having it. But you don't have to have the graphics, so don't fret over it. You don't need it. Okay, so hopefully it's okay to move on a step. So this is step 4 in my notes over here, is now I'm to the stage where I can finally install the i3 that you guys voted for. And this should be the last of the software that we actually have to download. Although I may put a web browser in here before I'm done. Yeah, wow, I've gone for a long time. Long video, if you're watching later, there's a be right back break in there. In fact, I won't do the browser today. I'll just get these 3 and then call it a day and then revisit this as needed. Okay, so i3 is now installed after all of that stuff. So now I'm on step 5 over here in my notes. So I'm going to go edit keep typing in the wrong place. I'm going to go edit my exinit.rc file. The first thing I'm going to do is comment out open box, and then I'm going to use O, get rid of that comment, and I'm going to do I3. So now when I save this and type start X, the I3 window manager will start. Okay, so here's I3. If you're watching or you're watching later, this is an important thing about my notes. So this is the first time I've run it on this system. Do I want to generate a config? So I'm going to press enter to say yes. Now, if you look carefully here, it says please choose either your Windows key or your Alt key as the default modifier. So I'm going to use my arrows on my keyboard. I personally want the Alt key, but that's what my notes all assume, is that the Alt key was selected here as the default modifier. And then I'm going to press enter, and it will save that selection. So this is another Windows manager. It offers nothing. Like if you right click, nothing happens. Middle click, nothing happens. Left click, nothing happens. It has a status window at the bottom that tells you about Wi-Fi connections, Ethernet connections, whether or not you're running on a battery, the size of your hard drive, the available RAM, and a timestamp. Pretty wild. But on the face of it, it doesn't appear that you can do anything. So if you look at my notes down here, I added a few of the basics. So you can, for example, by pressing your mod key, which I chose Alt, Enter, opens an interactive terminal, and now I can do work. If you do that again, by the way, if I do Alt Enter again, it will open another terminal, and automatically I3 is titling them on the screen, and I can keep opening them if I want to. And then you can quit the extra terminals with the File menu, or while you're highlighted on a terminal, you can do Alt-Shift-Q, which will quit it. That's some crazy stuff, man. That's mostly it. Until we get a web browser in there, which I may come back to because I know some people got stuck. So I might add a little bit more bonus content next week, although hopefully not an hour's extra. But maybe now you have a sense. I mean, it's not the most straightforward thing to go back and do this stuff manually, but it's awesome when you get it working. It feels great, and you also learn a lot. Oh, by the way, if you notice this one down here, so it has workspaces. So if I do Alt-2, I can get a workspace. If I do Alt-3, I can get a workspace. Alt-2, Alt-1. I can get more than one workspace, which is kind of cool. So Alt-Shift-Q to quit the terminal, and then Alt-Shift-E will bump you out of your I3 session. So I'll say yes, and then I'm back to the command line. Figuring that out, by the way, took me hours yesterday. That I3 part was a huge pain. So I hope that the instructions that I provided with that file that we downloaded are adequate to help you explore these window managers and Xface, which is a desktop environment. Please let me know on Piazza or by Canvas inbox if you want me to upload this virtual machine image with all of the goodies already on it, and I'll do that. If you want to do it for yourself, which is time consuming but the best way to learn it, also the most satisfying way to do it, then of course I encourage you to do that. So I'm going to stop. I don't know who stuck it around this long. If you did, good on you. My back's starting to hurt for sitting here like this for a while. So anyway, hope you have a great week. I'll be back next Tuesday. We won't do super crazy long ones like this possibly ever again, although I may try to mix in a few bonus a little bit of bonus content just so you have that option. I am going to put a web browser on my machine next week and just quickly review the install that I have, and then we'll have a web browser in our graphical environment, and that should be kind of nice to do. So that's it for me today. Sorry for those of you who had problems, and I hope my pacing is not terrible, but if you're watching the video later, you can control that, of course. Have a great week. I will see you on Tuesday next week. Thanks for your patience.